A 46-year-old man on the cover of Thrasher magazine may sound strange until you realize it's Andrew Reynolds, a living legend of skateboarding. But when 43-year-old Jerry Sue showed up on the cover a few months later, I started to wonder, how old are the skaters on Thrasher covers? After all, the whole skate industry has been saying skateboarding is old lately. But I wanted some data, and I quickly realized the story is a little bit more complicated. So the Jerry Sue Thrasher cover arrived in the mail the other day, and well, I actually really like the cover. One of my first thoughts was, I know Jerry's in his 40s, and they had Reynolds on the cover earlier this year, who's also in his 40s. How old are the cover skaters of Thrasher this year? So I looked at the numbers now that we are at the end of the year here, and I thought it was kind of interesting. Oldest skater was Andrew Reynolds, he's 46. The youngest was a tie between Alex Midler and Tom Schaar at 26. The youngest skater on Thrasher's cover being 26 was a little bit surprising, but not as surprising as finding out the average age was almost 31 and a half years old. I wondered, was this an anomaly, or did last year also have kind of a similar trend? So I pulled last year's data. I could not figure out Jeff Carlisle's age, but he's definitely older than 25, and it didn't really affect the average. The oldest skater last year was Lance Mountain, who was 60, and that was like a special edition 60th birthday issue. But Alyssa Steamer, 48, was also on the cover last year, as was Alexis Sablone, who's 38. The youngest was Felipe Mota at 18, and the average age last year was 32.7. So if we look at the last 2 years of Thrasher covers, the average age of the skater on the cover is 32 years old, which I'm 32 years old right now. And I've been skating for 20 plus years. I can't imagine what a 12 to 16-year-old sitting at home is thinking when they look at the cover of Thrasher, Skateboarding's Bible, and see a 32-year-old on the cover. It's just not relatable. And meanwhile, the entire industry is hemming and hawing about how skateboarding is getting old and kids aren't skating anymore. The cover of the issue is 32. That's gotta be a big reason why. But maybe I'm just misremembering. And so I went back 20 years to see if that was true. So I looked at all the Thrasher covers from 2004 to 2005. There were a couple ages I could not get, but got everybody's age for the most part. The oldest is Rick Howard at 33. So he's the oldest from 20 years ago, but he is only 1 year older than the average skater now. The youngest is Tommy Sandoval at 18, and the average here was 25.1 years old. So then, if we fast forward 10 years to 2014 to 2015, I did the same thing. A couple notes here. Louis Barletta and Ben Ramers had like a doubles photo on the cover, and Louis Barletta famously does not reveal his age. So I used 42 as a placeholder and averaged that with Ben Ramers, who I think was 23. So that's where this age comes from. January 2015 was a series of covers. So there were 4 different covers. All these guys were 23 to 25. So that average makes sense. And then similarly, September 2015, same thing, 2 different covers, and 23 and 25. So that averaged to 24. Anyway, the oldest skater to have the cover in these 2 years was Ave, who had it at 36. He also won SOTY that year. The youngest was Miles Silvas at 19, and the average here was 24.7 years old. So then I went ahead and I bucketed these skaters based on age groups. So basically every 5 years, under 20, early 20s, late 20s, early 30s, late 30s, and 40 plus. So we can kind of see the distribution here. The biggest group is the early 20s, then late 20s, then early 30s. If we go to 10 years later, we see the same thing. Biggest group is early 20s, then late 20s, then early 30s. But now, if we go to present day, the last 2 years, the biggest group is late 20s, then early 30s, then 40s is actually number 3. So we've shifted a whole bracket forward here and now have virtually no representation of teenage or early 20s skaters. And again, the whole industry is like, skating is getting so old. Why don't kids skate? this might be why. Not fully, but it certainly should be ringing an alarm bell and is illustrative of what is going on. There's no representation from the young kids. Now that we're in SOTY season, I kind of wondered if Skater of the Year was following this same trend. So I looked at the first 10 skaters of the year from 1990 to 99, and on average, they were a little over 20. Then if we look at the last 10 SOTYs, the oldest is 37, youngest is 20, but the average is 26. So almost a 5.5 year jump in terms of average age of your Skater of the Year from the beginning to present day. And if we graph this and put a trend line on it, you can also very clearly see skaters of the year are getting older. But I wanted more data. So Thrasher has been publishing the SOTY finalists to the internet since 2013. So that's as far back as this data goes. Over here, we've got all the multi-time finalists with the winners in gold here. And so 92 different names have been tapped as SOTY finalists, 56 unique skaters amongst that group. They don't pick the same amount of finalists every year. On average, there's 7.6, but it fluctuates. The most they've ever had was 13, and the fewest was 4. And the average age amongst these finalists tells an interesting story. So for the first 6 years of this data, that average age ranges from 23 to 25, and on an average as a whole is 23.6 years old. Now, the most recent 6 years look totally different. And we have an average of 27.5 years old for the most recent 6 years of SOTY finalists. So your average SOTY finalist has gotten 4 years older basically in the last 6 years, which means it's the same people. And if we look at this on a graph, again, you can see the same trend emerging. SOTY finalists are getting older. So I wondered if contest skateboarding has this same trend as well. So I looked at SLS, and yes, SLS winners are also getting older on average. SLS started in 2010, and in the first 3 seasons, the winner was on average a teenager, 18 and a half years old. Most recently, the winner has been 25.3 years old for the last 3 seasons. So SLS winners are also getting older. Now, I will say Nija skews a lot of this data. He's won almost half the contests, and he started winning in the very first year, and he is still winning this year. So if we put Nija's age on that graph, you can see he definitely influences this trend line, but it's pretty hard to remove him because he's won so many of the contests. So let's look at a different contest. We'll go over to Tampa Pro. There's been 30 Tampa Pros since 1995, and the average age of the winner is 23.2. Now, I put these into buckets of 5 years where I've averaged out the age of the winners in different 5-year spans. And if we graph that, we can again see that the age of Tampa Pro winners is getting older. Most recently, from 2020 to 24, the average skater has been 26 years old winning Tampa Pro. So street skateboarding is getting older with the Thrasher Covers and the SOTY finalists, and contest skating is getting older with SLS winners and Tampa Pro results. It kind of made me wonder how old professional athletes are in other sports. So I looked to the big ones. And actually, skateboarding isn't that old relative to the other major sports. Baseball players are in their late 20s. NBA and NFL and soccer players all seem to be around 26 years old, which is pretty similar to where we're seeing SOTY winners and SOTY finalists coalesce around. However, we're not really talking about your average skater here or even your average pro. We're talking about MVPs when it comes down to SOTY finalists, when it comes down to Thrasher Covers, and that lines up as well. MVP ages of these major sports also seem to align pretty much with where skaters are at. And so that kind of begs the question. Maybe skateboarding is just finding an equilibrium point as a maturing sport. Maybe we're not that old. Maybe this is just natural. But there's a big issue with that. For these pro athletes of traditional sports, they get paid directly for their talent. Now, sure, they can make some money off their marketability as well, but it's not a core part of the job. And even in minor league baseball, which is kind of like being a flow skater, these guys are getting paid for their talent alone. These sports leagues need to put out the best talent on the field to sell tickets, to sell TV deals, to sell merchandise. And that's how their industry operates. The skateboard industry is different. There are no TV deals, there are no jerseys, and the only arena getting sold out is Dime Glory Challenge once a year. The skateboard industry makes its money off selling skateboard products. And this means you don't just get paid for your talent, you get paid to be marketable and sell products. And now, in 2025, we have this huge demographic of skaters from the 90s and 2000s who are aging and are still skating, and they're still buying products. Now, this means major skate brands and skate media have been able to use the same skaters who are now peaking in their late 20s and early 30s to continue to sell to this demographic of aging skaters. And that's great. It moves boards, it keeps things flowing, but because we've moved so many resources to this market, we haven't done anything to build the marketability of the next generation of skaters. At the helm of it, Thrasher has shifted to only showing the major leaguers, leaving a huge gap in media coverage for the younger up-and-coming demographic. And sometimes there's a storyline of there's no young talent and younger skaters aren't as good. Let's jump over to Tampa Am for a minute. Tampa Am has actually been getting younger. The last skater to win Tampa Am that was over 20 happened in 2008. It's all teenagers. On average, the winner's 17.6 years old, and in the last 10 years, that's been 17.3 years old. And if we look at this trend, these skaters are getting younger. Now, Tampa Am used to be a contest where if you win Tampa Am, you are very much going pro and going pro soon. It's even a core part of the storyline in Tony Hawk's Underground. And previously, that was very true. I looked at all the winners of Tampa Am, age when they won, and then how many years it took them after to go pro. And a lot of them either went pro in the same year or within 3 years. On average, it takes less than 2 years from when you win Tampa Am to go pro for the first 20 years of this contest. Now, if we look recently, only 5 of the last 12 Tampa Am winners are pro at all. And it took them on average almost 5 years to get there. In particular, none of the recent winners until you go back to 2017 are pro. And it's not like they don't ride for companies. Kyrie rides for Zero, Daiki rides for Toy Machine, Laser's on Plan B, and had a really great part come out the year after. And none of them are pro. I don't understand why we're not jumping at the opportunity to market these younger skaters. And I get it's a risk from the company standpoint to put a bunch of dollars into teenagers. But this is also the same reason why we have nothing but action hero movies and sequels coming out from the film industry, is because nobody is willing to take risk. Instead, using Laser Crawford as an example, who is still not pro, Plan B is doing a collab with, I don't even know how to pronounce her name, and I'm sure this will sell a lot of boards. But in terms of long-term impact on your brand, I would imagine that spending some dollars hyping up Laser Crawford is going to pay you in the long run a little bit better than a collaboration like this. And culturally speaking, I think it'd be more worthwhile for skateboarding. Now, I wanted to look a little bit more into the whole Am and Pro thing, and so I went back to the Thrasher Covers. These are the Thrasher Covers skaters from the last 2 years, and I looked at whether they're Pro or Am. It turns out 23 of 24 of them are Pro. There's only been one Am, and that was the Felipe Mota Kickflip Front Blunt Hollywood High cover that was not a pro skater in the last 2 years, which again is highly problematic. We are not bringing up the next crop. We're not even introducing the next generation. Here we are a day later. I went to edit and realized I didn't really give a conclusion. Skateboarding is clearly getting older. People feel it, and the data backs it up. Part of it getting older is just a natural thing for a maturing sport. But the data also shows a rather large gap in how younger skaters used to be represented versus today. Fewer young skaters are being spotlighted by skate media and propped up by brand campaigns. This isn't just an emerging gap, it's here now and it's already rather large. The older skateboard generation is locked in. We're going to continue buying skateboard products. We need to get the new generation in as well, and the way to do that is to be relatable in who gets spotlighted. I think back to when I first started getting Thrasher when I was 12 or 13 years old. If they had sent me 32-year-olds on the cover for 2 years straight, I probably would have stopped paying attention too.